Hello, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started with our program today. So my name is Anna Tabor, and I want to welcome you to our panel discussion, Missing Participants, What's Next? Today's event is hosted by the UMass Boston Pension Action Center, where I serve as director. The Pension Action Center is a free pension counseling and advocacy service that helps retirees secure and understand their retirement benefits. We're located at UMass Boston as part of the Gerontology Institute and the McCormick Graduate School. The Pension Action Center helps participants and beneficiaries locate their lost accounts. Today, we're focusing on one element of this problem, missing participants. Missing participants and beneficiaries are people whom retirement plans can't locate, generally because the plans no longer have accurate contact information. The Employee Benefit Security Administration, or Ebsa, has been very active in this area. Ebsa's annual enforcement reports describe billions of dollars in benefits that have been reunited with participants through the agency's work. In January 2021, Ebsa issued new guidance describing its compliance expectations. The guidance was issued in 3 parts: a best practices document, a compliance assistance release, and a field assistance bulletin. Today, we've assembled a panel of experts to discuss what plan sponsors, administrators, record keepers, and others should be doing in light of the new guidance. First, a couple of quick housekeeping matters. We are recording today's presentation to post to our website. Also, we will have a few minutes for questions at the end. So if you have a question, please post it to the Q&A or the chat section. We have a lot to talk about in the next hour and a very impressive set of panelists who I'm going to introduce to you now. First of all, it's my pleasure to introduce Mary Rosen, who is Deputy Regional Director at the Department of Labor's Employee Benefit Security Administration. Mary is responsible for carrying out Ebsa's civil enforcement program under Ebsa, among other statutes. She has been with Ebsa since 1987. Welcome, Mary. Oh, sorry, Mary, I think you're on mute.
I apologize. Thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Sabinek, who serves as Deputy Assistant General Counsel for Regulatory Affairs at the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, where she is involved in the development and publication of regulations and other Pbgc guidance. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us today.
Thanks, Anna. Really happy to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Krista Deloya, who joins us from Fidelity Investments, where she is Senior Vice President and Deputy General Counsel and supports Fidelity's workplace retirement business. Krista has worked at Fidelity for over 20 years, and she previously worked at the Department of Labor and also the New York Attorney General's office. Thank you, Krista, for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Kelsey Chen. Kelsey is Senior Assistant General Counsel at Millennium Trust Company. Millennium Trust Company is a leading provider of retirement and institutional services with 1.9 million client accounts and over $31 billion in assets. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Tyler Compton, who is my colleague at the Pension Action Center, where she serves as staff attorney and represents participants who need assistance locating or otherwise securing their benefits. Before joining the Pension Action Center, Tyler worked at Vermont Legal Aid in the Elder Law Unit. Thank you, Tyler, for joining us.
Thanks, Anna. Glad to be here.
And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Holdvote, who is a partner at McDermott, Will, and Emery. Jeff advises clients regarding a wide range of employee benefits matters, focusing primarily on the design and administration of complex pension, defined contribution, and executive deferred compensation agreements. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Anna. Glad to be here.
Now let's start our discussion. Mary, I'd like to start by turning to you to ask if you can give us some background and context on the missing participant guidance. Can you tell us about why Ebsa issued the guidance?
Well, Anna, Ebsa is committed to ensuring that retirement benefits are safe and secure and available to participants when they retire. So what we learned over the past several years through our enforcement is that many plan participants were not receiving their retirement benefits when due. And we focused our enforcement efforts into looking into this matter. So our investigations of defined benefit plans, we wanted to know what the reasons were for this happening. And we found that there were many reasons, whether it be that the participant didn't leave forwarding information, didn't change their contact information with the employer, or the employer didn't have accurate records. The employer didn't do research to ensure that the records were correct or to update information, or they just, simply didn't use any type of search tools that they had available to them to find these missing participants. So throughout the last several years, we've been involved with these plan sponsors in implementing the best practices that we found from the really good sponsors who had accurate records and who had great procedures in locating these missing plan participants. And I'm happy to say that we've had tremendous success. Like, I'm reiterating what you said earlier. Throughout, the last few years, we've recovered billions of dollars for missing participants through our efforts in working with these plan sponsors.
Now that the guidance is out there, Mary, are plans required to take the steps in the guidance?
Well, I would say this, okay, if the plans want to fulfill their fiduciary responsibilities under Title I of ERISA, they should be following this guidance. If they're not having, if they don't have best practices in place where they're not having trouble locating plan participants, they should be putting these best practices into place, because it is the responsibility of these plan fiduciaries to locate these plan participants and pay them their money on retirement.
And sort of cutting to the chase, what responsibilities does a pension or a 401k plan have to identify and notify missing participants that they have a benefit?
There's a lot of practices that they should be implementing, or that they should have implemented to locate these participants. First of all, they should be maintaining accurate records. So, they should update their records or audit their records occasionally to make sure that they have accurate addresses and benefit information on the participants who have terminated. They should be making sure that they have adequate communications with these individuals. Oftentimes an individual, if they're not familiar with something that they get in the mail, they'll simply throw it away. But if the correspondence says eligibility for pension benefits and has the name of the company that they worked for, it's a better chance that they won't run into this problem. So communication is key. If they find that they're having a lot of trouble, that there are a lot of missing participants and they're not getting in touch with these people, there are resources that they can turn to, both on the internet, free search engines, and also hiring agencies that do this, for the work. These are some of the things that we implemented when we worked with the plan sponsors to find missing participants, and we're quite successful in doing that.
And Mary, can you elaborate on sort of under what circumstances will Ebsa cite a violation?
What we're doing right now is we're more concerned about bringing about compliance. So even though we will reference potential violations in our voluntary compliance, our VC letters, we call them, to plan sponsors, we will not cite a violation with respect to a plan fiduciary. We're hoping to, change the way plans operate, bring about remedies, and bring about correction that goes forward, instead of trying to, assess blame and assess violations. So we really want to work together with these plan sponsors to bring about compliance. Only in egregious situations will we, I shouldn't say it's always the case. If we find a particularly egregious situation with multiple fiduciary violations, then we may, it may make a difference.
And can you give us an update on the status of Ebsa's Terminated Vested Participants project? And, will that change at all now that the guidance has been issued?
Over the past several years, we've been very busy. We've conducted a number of investigations, as I mentioned, and of both good and not so good situations. We've accumulated data that has allowed us to put out these best practices and the guidance, the compliance guidance and so forth. So we're hoping, we're hoping that this will bring about a change through the sponsors' efforts and not so much through our enforcement efforts. We'd like to see the industry adopt these best practices and change procedures.
Thank you, Mary. Now I'm going to turn to the rest of the panel, and I'd like to ask the group to share with us what are some of the issues and challenges that your clients and organizations are facing in this area, and why is this an important issue? Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thanks, Anna. So I'm a private attorney, and I work with a number of plan sponsors and plan administrators who administer pension plans and 401k plans, other retirement plans. And I think, so there's a couple of responses I would give. So I think number one, the Department of Labor's focus on this, and then, in addition, beyond the Department of Labor, the IRS is very, very focused on this, both in terms of, issuing guidance and in terms of audit activity over the last couple of years, and focusing on this quite a bit. It has put a lot of pressure, good pressure, in a good sense, on plan sponsors and plan administrators to really up their games in this area and really focus on this. And I'll say, in particular, an area where I think this was a real issue, and I think things are changing, is with older defined benefit pension plans. So, I just to give one example, I work with a pension plan that's been around for, about 40 years. And if, I were to go back 10 years ago, they were in a situation, the administrators of the plan, where if an employee, terminated employment and left the company at, let's say, age 45, and the plan provides a pension benefit at age 65, they might have been given a letter that said, here, you've got this deferred vested benefit, and, give us a call when you turn 65 and we'll start your pension. And, there might not have been any communication for 20 years then in between that time. And that's just not the case anymore. And I think it's quite clear under, with the Department of Labor guidance and what is clearly expected as part of plan administrator's fiduciary duty, that just doesn't work anymore. So that, to continue the example, that same plan administrator has, as I mentioned, upped its game. And, now it's in a situation where, there's not necessarily annual, but, periodic communications with deferred vested participants, particularly as the participant approaches the age 65 normal retirement age. There's frequent communication to try to get the participant to commence their pension at the normal retirement age, and then continuing on, even if for whatever reason they don't commence at 65, then there's an even more focus on making sure they commence prior to that required beginning date, because of the focus that the IRS and Department of Labor in particular have had on that. So it's been an interesting development, and it's been a significant change, I think, in the way a lot of plans are administered, in large part because of this Department of Labor focus. And I think, these best practices that have been issued, I think, go a long way to, further shining a light on this and giving plan administrators some, specific guidance in terms of what they should be doing.
Thank you, Jeff. That's very helpful. Kelsey, how about you? Can you talk about how this affects Millennium?
Sure. So I work with Millennium Trust, and we offer automatic rollovers to plan fiduciaries, which essentially means that we can open IRAs for missing or non-responsive former participants, largely focused on low balances, so under $5,000. So the DL's guidance isn't directly applicable to us, but it sort of focuses exactly on the back end of what we're doing, is when plans aren't able to find people, or those people aren't responsive, we then can come in and play the role in finding, locating, communicating with those participants, and then also educating them to keep their funds in the system. I think that's the ultimate goal, is not only connecting people, but also encouraging them to stay in the tax advantage retirement system. When we read the red flag document, I think we did chuckle. These are things that we see all the time in our practices. So we get missing participant lists and, well, there's no Social Security. So yes, that is a lot harder to find somebody when you don't have that information. So I think that's things that we agree we do see in the industry. And I think we also agree with the emphasis on not only maintaining and updating that information, but also making sure that your communications are really, really clear. I think most of us, I get very few things in the mail these days, and I probably throw 99% of it out. And I think that makes this a really complicated process. So I think, you know, the more clear we can make and just user friendly and easy, so it doesn't look like junk mail, the more we can play up the employer name, I think that's really, really helpful. In the case of the small balances that often come to Millennium, I think that's really important to make sure that people get the notice they may be coming to a company like Millennium. I think people assume it's just missing participants, but it's not. Lots of people choose to come to Millennium. They don't want to take their funds in a cash out because they want to keep it in the system. And it really helps us when people get that good communication. Mary mentioned third-party search providers, and that's certainly something that we can provide when we search. Part of our business model is searching for participants, and I think we can play a great role in helping plan fiduciaries while that person is still in the plan to make sure they have that good information. And then obviously, even with great search procedures, there are some people who either are just really, really hard to find despite your best efforts, or who simply don't respond. It's very hard to know who's not responding and who's missing. And I think in that case, particularly for low dollar accounts under $5,000, I think an automatic rollover is a really good solution. You know, as I said, it keeps people in the system so that they're still getting that tax preserved status. Millennium, for example, will continue to search. We search on day one when those accounts come over, and we continue to search until we know we have a current address. We've got a tremendous amount of investment options and education options for people to, again, really just not only find them, but also keep them in the retirement system, whether it's facilitating an easy rollover to a plan of their choice, or just keeping them in an IRA at Millennium and giving them investment options that are more closely aligned with their financial goals.
Great, thank you, Kelsey. Tyler, I'd like to turn to you and ask you to speak to this question. You know, as someone who represents participants, how does this issue sort of present challenges for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the participant perspective, it's really just a challenging issue, just in general, to try to reach out to a plan and say, oh, I think I have a benefit. I have, you know, this old information that says I might have a benefit, and to be told we have no record of you. And so luckily we do get a lot of calls from these people who have, you know, kind of said, I think I have this benefit, and reached out to a plan. And then for whatever reason, they're either a missing participant or they've been omitted from the plan records. And we usually see this happen through kind of transfers of the original company, where the original company no longer exists. And it's kind of gone through all of these different iterations. But what we're able to do at PAC, what we're able to do for these clients are, we can gather the necessary information and then help prove either this person is entitled to a benefit, or be able to determine what happened to why they're no longer on the list. Sometimes it's because there was a lump sum payout at some point, and other times it's, you know, maybe the person actually wasn't vested as they thought. But a lot of the times we are able to determine, oh, this person was just either omitted, or when they called, they were turned away due to having a different address than what's on file. The plan might have not had the proper Social Security number. All of these reasons why someone might have been missing from the plan records. And I guess our main concern here is mostly when someone is told no by the plan. Oh, no, you're not on our list. No, we don't think you have a benefit. And then they accept that. You know, they don't reach out to PAC for help. They don't kind of try to dig in and find records that would disprove what the plan tells them. And so that's really what we see on our end as a main issue, is trying to reach those people who are just initially told no.
Thank you, Tyler. And I'm glad you raised the issue of sort of plan transitions and mergers and acquisitions, because we'll be talking about that later in the program as well. Krista, I'd like to direct the next question to you. Can you talk about how record keepers can support plans in identifying missing participants and engaging in best practices?
Yeah, sure. So, and I will say it is a big issue from a record keeping perspective as we record keep plans, because especially given the fact that younger people tend to transfer jobs. It's not like you stay with the same company. So there is the idea that you move from employer to employer, and in a defined contribution context, you may have been able to save a balance that even exceeds the de minimis amount, but it's not a significant balance that you may actually forget about. And certainly it's important that you maintain contact with the record keeper if you choose to live in the plan. One of the things that we've been doing, and we've done it prior to the DOL doing its guidance, but we've certainly looked at the best practices because we want to assist the plan sponsors in locating these folks, is to increase the electronic contact information we have for individuals. Because while people may move, one way to get in touch with them is through email or even through cell phone number, which we are gathering for two-factor authentication. So there's a number of reasons why we need that information for an individual, but one of the most important is to be able to have an alternative way to contact them, because as the others spoke to, sometimes a communication is simply put into the recycle bin. It's not read. It looks like a form letter. It is a form letter. And so it's not necessarily something that folks will pay attention to. And the best practices do give a lot of good tips for plan sponsors to administer. Our services currently do not include all of them, and some of them are not something that a record keeper could do, but we are going out and we're educating plan sponsors, large and small, about the responsibilities. In addition to one of the things we're doing now, and we have done in the past, but we're enhancing, is reporting to plan sponsors. They know if we've gotten return mail from an individual that person, is potentially missing. And so we can work together, especially if they're still active, while they're still in the employ of the company. That's the better way to get better information. A little more difficult when in fact they've left and the employer no longer has sees them every day or has them on their payroll.
Great, thank you, Krista. I'd like to, the next question, I think several of you may want to weigh in on this, but so how can a plan determine which of these best practices in the guidance are appropriate in a given set of circumstances?
So I can jump in here and talk about this first. I mean, I think your starting point should be that I think all plan administrators should be reviewing the Department of Labor best practices and the guidance that they've issued and using them where appropriate. I mean, I think as Mary said earlier, pretty much plan administrators should be following those best practices. Unless they have a good reason otherwise, and they should expect, for example, that if there were an audit situation, that if they were in a situation where they had a significant number of missing participants, sort of disproportionate to what one might expect for the scenario, that the Department of Labor would look at that closely and be asking, we issued this guidance, why aren't you using these best practices? So, for example, why haven't you been reaching out to participants, trying to communicate about this? Why haven't you been, including provisions in your notices about, asking participants to make sure they update their contact information or provide information? So I think, as a starting point, I think it's important to just note that plan administrators should all be taking a look at this and be considering this as part of their, general fiduciary duty towards participants and beneficiaries.
I do think we could ask that question a lot, right? And, you know, we can't give our clients legal advice. They'll say, well, how much do I need to do? And I think it is facts and circumstances, depending on, you know, the size of the balance, right? You're going to do potentially a lot more to try to track down, you know, a balance of, you know, $500,000 in a plan than maybe something that's lower, $800. And not that $800 is a lot of money, because it is, but you know, the cost of actually tracking folks down. I think the other thing to think about is the guidance given is also is designed to think about things other than sending things via mail, because that has not proven to be the most successful method of tracking people down. So trying to be more creative and to look to other ways to actually find a participant. And then also just, you know, potentially waiting, right? Somebody might be non-responsive, as Kelsey said, but, you know, if you look again in 3 months or 6 months, you may be able to find them. I don't know, Mary, if you had additional thoughts.
I think that you and Jeffrey really hit on it. You know, I think after all, you know, we conducted so many investigations that they ran the gamut. So we tried to compile the best practices that we found from the plans that were doing it right. And I think that, you know, plans that are having problems, why not look at these best practices? Why not implement these best practices? It is on a case-by-case basis, and it is, you know, not all plans have problems like this, but if, you know, plans that do have significant numbers of missing participants should be looking at these best practices. Some of them, you know, they don't have to. I had a very strange situation. I went out with an investigator to a very, very large employer in Buffalo, New York. And it was a defined benefit plan. And I said, oh God, they're going to have so many missing participants. They had 2 out of all of the participants that they were paying, that were eligible for retirement. They had 2 missing participants. One of them lived down the street, and they weren't having any success in reaching him because his 92-year-old mother was answering the phone. He lived with her. So I said to them, why don't you take a ride over there and bring the documentation with you and see what happens? And they got in touch with me the next week and said, we're down to 1. So, you know, sometimes you have to think outside the box too. So anyway.
That's a great success story. Great. I just want to remind the audience, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat or in the Q&A. And now I'd like to turn, Stephanie, to you and ask you some questions about the Pbgc's Missing Participant Program. Can you give us an update on the program, and are you seeing any trends?
Sure. Thanks, Anna. Again, happy to be here to talk briefly about Pbgc's Missing Participants Program. And just with all panels like this or any speaking, I just have to say as a reminder that the views expressed are my own, and all remarks are off the record and not for attribution. And that if you want an official statement, you can contact our public affairs office. So as Anna said, and many of you may know, that Pbgc has had a missing participants program for terminated single employer defined benefit plans since 1996. But that program was expanded under the Pension Protection Act, or it authorized expansion of the program. And so we've had an expanded program available to a new set of retirement plans for just about 3 years now. So the expanded program covers terminated defined contribution plans, terminated small professional service defined benefit plans, which are plans with the professional service plans with 25 or fewer participants, and who are not covered by Pbgc's insurance program. And then it also brought in multi-employer plans. So the main difference in these types of plans, or how they use the program, is that it is voluntary for the non-Pbgc insured plans. So these are, again, the defined contribution and small professional service defined benefit plans. So it is a required program for Pbgc insured defined benefit plans. The purpose of the program is to connect people who are missing when their retirement plan terminated to their retirement benefits. And the program holds retirement benefits for participants or beneficiaries and helps the participants and beneficiaries find and receive benefits being held for them. Plans can use the program in two ways. So either on the voluntary side or on the required side, mandatory side. So either by transferring the missing participants benefit amount into the program or sending the program information about where the benefit is being held. And for defined contribution plans, it would typically mean the financial institution where the plan set up an IRA on behalf of the participant. So one of the questions that I guess I've gotten over the past few years is are transfers to the Pbgc missing participant program subject to tax withholding and reporting? And so that answer is no, that the program for DC and other, these other new types of plans in the expanded program works in the same way that the legacy program did for defined benefit plans. And that is that amounts transferred by a terminated defined contribution plan and other plans under the program are not taxable distributions subject to withholding and reporting. So when Pbgc finds a participant and the participant claims their benefit, Pbgc will issue a 1099 at that point when the participant is paid. So, and if you're interested, and I always like to point people to our rulemaking document, and the preamble in this case is that under a section called coordination and consultation, which is looks at the coordination and consultation we did with IRS, Treasury, and DOL, is that you can find the statement from IRS about this tax treatment. So some other key aspects of the program, just to mention to you all, is that the program takes in missing participant benefits no matter how small. There's no fee for transferring small benefit amounts, so which the program describes as amounts below or $250 or less into the program. And there's only a one-time administrative fee of $35 for benefit amounts that are transferred that are over $250. So there are no other charges involved. So no maintenance fees, no search fees, no distribution charges. And there is no fee if you're just sending us information about where a benefit is being held. So Pbgc holds benefits indefinitely. They stay with us until the participant or beneficiary is found, and the benefit amounts earn interest at the federal midterm rate. And Pbgc also actively searches immediately. So we do an immediate search once we intake a plan, and then we search periodically thereafter. And then lastly, I think just to mention is that in addition to lump sum and annuity forms of payment, so found participants can continue to grow their retirement savings tax-free by receiving their benefits as rollovers into a qualified retirement plan or IRA. So part of the update is that I know we've the panel's been talking about earlier about the best practices that DOL issued. And I just wanted to mention that one of the other pieces of guidance that DOL issued in January was a field assistance bulletin. So a temporary enforcement policy in FAB 2021-01 that basically facilitates the transfer of missing participant account balances to Pbgc on the termination or abandonment of a DC plan. And so I would also point you to the preamble of our rulemaking document. So for the final rule for the missing participants program, and that rule was published in December of 2017. And there you can find, again, in the coordination and consultation section where DOL mentioned that, they were going to look at their guidance and rules on and to try to coordinate with and what needed to change or to try to coordinate with Pbgc's program. So I would recommend looking at that field assistance bulletin. I think it's really helpful. I wanted to mention that also as part of that field assistance bulletin, there's helpful guidance on another question I guess that I've also gotten from practitioners is that whether that $35 administrative fee that I mentioned for amounts over $250 could be paid from DC plan accounts. And the FABs states that a plan fiduciary may pay this fee from the transferred account unless the plan terms prohibit such payment. So again, I encourage everyone to take a look at that FAB.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm just curious, what has the response been since the program was expanded 3 years ago?
So yeah, it's still, so it has been just 3 years and the program is still in its infancy. And I can say that it's still a small program, but it's growing. You know, we see more DC counts, it seems, over as, the last couple years. So, but it is still a small growing program.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure.
Thanks. Before I move on, actually, Mary, I'd like to turn to you just to see if you had anything else that you'd like to add about the sort of interaction between the Field Assistance Bulletin and the Pbgc program.
I've seen that there's been some success. In fact, some of our benefits advisors are working with the Pbgc. They're involved in, facilitating participation in their program as well. So, I think it's a great program. I hope that it's as successful as the, what they've implemented for defined benefit plans. So, I'm hopeful that it will succeed and that we'll be successful in helping participants in defined contribution plans as well. So.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, now I'd like to switch gears, and I want to ask you all about the impact of COVID on all of this. So the guidance notes that there may be some circumstances in the current crisis that can exacerbate missing participant-related challenges. And so I'm just interested to hear from all of you. How do you see COVID-19 impacting missing participants and the missing participant dilemma?
So this is Krista. I'll start. I guess from our perspective, we did see, given the crisis that we're still continuing in, especially with the relief that the CARES Act gave to allow individuals to withdraw from the retirement plan if they needed that, given the pandemic, is what we've actually seen is the increase in electronic information, which has been super helpful in keeping track of folks. Because given, especially at the beginning, there were a lot of concerns about the mail, both actually sending it and also folks being worried about receiving it and opening envelopes, that we've expedited and encouraged, and plan sponsors were very helpful in encouraging participants to actually, if they were requesting distributions, giving us banking information so we didn't even have to cut checks. We could transfer it directly to the bank. Was much more quickly, much more efficient. Didn't involve having to go to a bank and cash a check. So we've actually been able to use, increase our electronic interaction with participants that were, again, for COVID distribution purposes. But I think it will help us ongoing to be able to keep track of individuals, because in addition to their physical address, we'll also have an email and perhaps a cell phone number to be able to reach out to them.
Thanks, Krista.
I can go next briefly. I think on Millennium's side, not surprisingly, we have seen and expect to see some increase in the smaller balance that are rolled out, given the job loss at the beginning of the pandemic, and now on a more positive note, what seems to be a really hot hiring market. So perhaps people are only in jobs for a short period of time. So I think we have seen a little bit of pickup there. I think for us, it's really just reiterated the importance of keeping people connected with their retirement savings. I think everybody hopes that when people have an emergency, they're not using their retirement savings and they have other means to do that, but that's not always the case. I think particularly for a lot of clients that are rolled out, and I think it's important that we at least give the people that option to stay connected with those funds to make the financial decisions that are best for them.
Yeah. And I'll just say, for our clients who, are particularly vulnerable, COVID-19 obviously has been a huge disruptor in their daily lives. A lot of our clients were essential workers. We had a lot of clients who were nurses. And for those of them who are trying to start the retirement process, trying to start their pensions, the very beginning of the pandemic was very difficult. I'd say for two reasons. First was with everyone going remote, there was a difficulty with correspondence as everyone kind of tried to transition into remote work. One way I'll say that aspect has actually gotten better. Just to echo what Krista had said, we've seen a lot of things that were traditionally kind of done over the phone switch to online, including one of my favorite things that I've seen are a lot of financial institutions will put the ability to make appointments with an agent online. So you could just go online and book time for an appointment. And that has been actually really a good outcome from this kind of terrible situation. But the second problem that we've seen, the second struggle that our clients have had to deal with that specifically relates to the missing participant issue is we've had a lot of difficulty getting documentation that would be needed and necessary to prove that they were a participant in the plan. This, for example, would be the Social Security itemized statement of earnings. Social Security was pretty backlogged for a very long period during the pandemic, and obtaining historical financial information from banks. So we've kind of seen over the past year, the ability to get these documents, these necessary documents, we've seen that slow down, but luckily we've seen them pick back up. But for a while that was very difficult for our clients, especially in terms of the most vulnerable clients who were dealing with financial insecurity.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, so switching gears again, we touched on this earlier, the role that mergers, acquisitions, and name changes and other types of plan transitions play in the missing participant problem. And so I would like to ask the panelists to speak to the steps that plans and record keepers should take at these transition points in order to manage the risk. Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can talk specifically regarding plan sponsors and plan administrators. I guess first on this topic, I thought it was really noteworthy in the Department of Labor guidance that this issue of mergers and acquisitions came up in the context of opening investigations, suggesting that this is when there's corporate mergers or plan mergers, that these are the types of issues that might be noticed and might be something that causes the opening of an investigation because of the particular focus on this issue. And I think that's something that plan sponsors and plan administrators should be particularly aware of, that both corporate mergers and plan mergers create this, let's call it a heightened risk of there being issues with missing participants down the line, and the Department of Labor is really focused on this. In terms of specifics, I'll just note that I work with a lot of plan sponsors when there are corporate acquisitions taking place. And I think one of the takeaways here is that for those who work in the context of corporate mergers or divestitures, it's really important to make this a focus when that activity is occurring. So for example, a plan sponsor, a company, acquiring another company that, let's just say they have a 401k plan, putting a focus on, prior to the acquisition, putting a focus on the selling party, doing their full diligence in terms of searching for missing participants and getting their data in order so that the acquiring company, when they bring that plan in, has the best data available. And then in turn, post-acquisition, making sure that plan administrators of, an acquiring company that are, taking over sponsorship of a plan, or maybe there's a merger of a plan, taking steps right away, or, as soon as reasonably possible after a merger, to integrate that data and make sure that the records and data are there. Because what happens is over time, the data gets lost, the people who are working with the data are no longer with the company. And over time, it's really easy for that to snowball into significant missing participant problems. So it's really helpful to have the Department of Labor, highlight that and mention it as something that plan sponsors, administrators should be focusing on, so that it can be something that, it's really easy to highlight for them. And for someone in my position, it's really easy to highlight for them the importance of this issue.
Thank you, Jeff. Following up with a related question, so the guidance also recognizes that sometimes defined benefit pensions in particular inherit data that is flawed or incomplete. And perhaps this question is for you, Mary. So what steps can a plan take if it realizes that it has inherited data that is so insufficient that it simply cannot comply with the regulatory expectations?
That's a difficult situation. I think the planned fiduciaries have to do the best, take every step that they can to try to, clarify the information, whether it means going through, employee records, payroll information to identify employees who may be entitled to a benefit. I mean, there's, flawed information, they'd have to go back to maybe employees who were involved at the time, service providers that were involved at the time, perhaps have an audit of this, get outside assistance to do an audit of the materials to find answers. I mean, it's really a tough situation when that happens, but there are ways by doing research and by exploring options that you have in finding the information. So I would say to a plan in this situation, don't be discouraged, just try to do as much as you can to, fill in the pieces. I mean, that's all they can do. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Welcome.
And what about from the participant perspective? And so perhaps I'll start with you, Tyler, to answer this. What should participants do if they reach out to their plan and their data is incomplete or missing?
Well, first I'd say call us, call PAC. I think that'd be a great first place to start. But the most important things for participants is to not really accept the plan's initial kind of denial there, the initial, oh, we don't have you, you must not have a benefit here. The primary way that they should kind of start this is, try to gather the information that they have, any old vesting paperwork that they have, to look and see if they can obtain work history records, anything to kind of go back to the plan and say, oh no, I think, I think I might be actually missing from your list. I think I definitely was entitled to a benefit. And here's all the proof and here's all the reasons, so that the plan would have the opportunity to then go double check and make sure that this is not a missing participant situation, but rather, oh, sorry, we paid you out and here's proof that we paid you out. Otherwise, that evidence, those documents showing that the person was probably entitled to a benefit will go a long way for the plan to realize this is a missing participant and to then pay out the benefits. But definitely call PAC.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Mary, do you have anything to add?
One of the problems is sometimes participants get notification and they don't recognize from whom the notice is coming. So in particular, in situations where there are mergers and acquisitions, the correspondence should include, the employers that have been acquired, you could have belonged to, if you worked for so this company, it's now part of this plan. The participant may not be aware of that. They get something from ABC company and they worked for XYZ company and XY, they're saying, what's this? This doesn't pertain. So making sure that the sponsor provides the participants with clear information is key.
Great, thank you. And Stephanie, I want to ask you as well. It's exciting to hear about these developments with the Pbgc program. Can individuals reach out to the Pbgc to see whether the Pbgc has their benefits?
Yeah, you could definitely, I mean, people can contact us and if they think they have a benefit with us. So there is a number on, I forget what page it is, but on pbgc.gov for unclaimed pensions. But there's also like, if you're not, so you don't have to try to search for that page. I think there's contact information sort of at the top of every, page for who to contact for customer service for participants.
Mm-hmm. And Kelsey, I want to ask you the same question as well. Does Millennium receive calls from individual participants who are looking for benefits that they've lost and they don't necessarily know where they are?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that we get a tremendous amount of cold calls from people that we haven't reached out to, but we do get a lot of calls from people who say, who are you and why did you send me a letter and how did my money get here? And so I think, I think Mary hit it on the head, both in the communications that are coming from the plan sponsors as well as anything that we're sending, just making sure that we can clearly say, here's how you got here, here's why this happened. And just really give people the context. I think it can be a little bit of a jarring experience for people. Some people are happy they found money. Others are less happy that they didn't have this money for whatever reason.
Right, I'm sure. All right, I'm going to ask the panel one last question, and then we do have a few questions from the audience as well. So I would love to hear from you. What developments you anticipate in the industry in response to this guidance? And Kelsey, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think the guidance was really helpful, and I think it zeroes in on a really important issue of finding people. I think the next step is then making sure people have the tools and resources and the encouragement once they're claimed not to pull their money out of the system. I think we know, particularly after COVID, we have to make it really, really easy for people to both find the money and then either leave it where it is or put it someplace else in the system. We want to try to, I don't want to say discourage, but we want to make it easy for them to do that as opposed to taking it out of the system, paying the taxes on it, et cetera. So I think we'll continue to see actions in that sense as now we've found you and here's how we make it really easy for you to stay someplace within the retirement system.
Thank you. Tyler?
I would think just for our participants, it would probably be a more formalized process of explaining when someone calls and they're, omitted from the list or they're a missing participant, to not say you don't have a pension, but to say you're not on our list or we don't have you in your records, just so that it doesn't kind of shut down people and people just think, oh, I don't have a pension, I was wrong. And then kind of give the opportunity of trying to find documentation to show that you were an admitted participant or that you were eligible for a benefit. I think that'd be really helpful for our clients.
Thanks. Jeff?
I'll just say quickly, I expect more and better communication from plan sponsors and plan administrators to participants, both in terms of, like I said, more communication, more frequent communication, and then better communication in the sense of including specific language, reminding participants and beneficiaries to keep the plan administrator apprised of address changes, providing ways to do that via, websites and, other electronic means. And then in addition, we didn't really touch on, but I think, the guidance about dealing with non-English speakers. I think clearly one of the best practices is to include language and communications, directing non-English speakers how they can get more information and make sure that they're apprised of their status as well. And it's clear the Department of Labor is focused on that. And I would expect plan administrators to focus on that then too.
Thank you. Krista, what's next in the future? What's coming up?
Yeah, I do think, again, definitely electronic communication with individuals. One thing I'll mention is, and this is tying to a point that Kelsey made, is we do want people to keep their money in the retirement system for as long as they can until they need it at retirement. And so one of the things that potentially will happen in legislation is the ability to help individuals have emergency savings, so they don't have to draw on the retirement plan when they have an emergency. And that I think will be helpful to keeping the retirement savings designed for retirement versus having to access it prior to that if there's a crisis.
Great, thank you. Stephanie.
So I guess I would definitely echo what everyone has said here about, that encouraging people, and that hopefully all of this guidance together helps to keep retirement savings in the retirement system. It's really, really important. So, and for Pbgc's program, for terminated plans, again, it's I'm really happy about the DOL guidance, and I kind of look forward to see what kind of how that affects our program and DC, obviously in DC plans in particular. So
Great, thanks, Stephanie. And Mary, let's turn to you.
I'm very encouraged by what's happened, and what we've found through our enforcement activities. And I really feel like if everyone has the same interests in mind, and that is, providing retirement benefits at retirement, that everyone will move in a positive direction and see these, the guidance that we've put out there as a positive thing and refer to it and use it accordingly. Because if we do that, then we'll be in good shape, and it will be crisis averted. So,
Great. Thank you, Mary. We only have 1 minute left, and I did want to at least take one question from the audience, because I had promised that. So we have a question here about using state unclaimed property databases. And Mary, perhaps you can speak to that, whether plans are permitted to send benefits to the states, to their unclaimed property databases.
We see that as a last ditch effort. We prefer that they not do that, but I mean, we're not completely opposed to it. If there's no other way for the, no other place for the funds to go, yeah, we haven't come out and said you cannot escheat them to the state. It is a viable option. It's not the best option.
All right, and with that, unfortunately, we are out of time. So I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for speaking here today. And on behalf of the Pension Action Center, I would also like to thank everyone in the audience as well for joining us. I hope that if you were interested in what you heard today, that you'll look at our Pension Action Center website and subscribe to our Twitter feed to learn more about the work that we do. If you're interested in supporting us, we do rely on donations from our generous supporters, and you can make a donation to us through our website as well. Thank you so much again for joining us, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of the day.